It is 6:35. We'll call the meeting to order, please. Can I get someone make a motion to enter public session, please?
I'll make a motion to enter public session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're in public session. Roll call, please.
All right, Mr. Nevins.
Here.
Mrs. Jaskula.
Here.
Mr. Luke.
Here.
Mrs. Shake.
Here.
And Mr. Rahman is not present today.
Correct.
Everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the
United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Comments from the public on agenda items. Just a reminder for those in the public in attendance, this is one of two opportunities afforded members of the public to inquire on or comment about agenda items. Members of the public may also have an opportunity at the end of this evening's agenda to comment on matters not formally noted in the agenda. We appreciate everyone's cooperation.
BOE comments at manans.org.
Comments at manans.org. Is there anyone online this evening?
We do have two people in the meeting right now.
And does anyone have anything?
No questions yet.
I have no comments online. We did have a number of comments come in over the last couple of weeks, but they were specific to the forum, and those were all responded and posted on the webpage. And everybody who submitted a response or a question or a comment via the BOE comments got a return email directing them to where that was posted.
We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Make a resolution, please.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Manans Union Free School District accept the minutes of the January 9th meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That resolution passes. Communications to the board.
Two there.
There's a communication from the Yearbook Club thanking the board for advertising the yearbook. And there's communications from BOCES to the board in regards to the district's snapshot of services, 2021-2022 school year. Has everyone had a chance to read that? That's the annual meeting coming up. Superintendent's reports and updates, please.
Certainly, we're going to start with our long-range financial plan. We have Jason Schwartz from Bernie Donegan's. His presentation tonight is something we do annually to review our long-range financial plan along with any updates. And it was timely and kind of intentional that we have him here tonight because following this meeting, we will go into our first budget workshop. And some of what he will present tonight, you will see again in that budget presentation and will be
You're
good
just have the
information
right
to have
side
as
of the
we move
screen. I'll
into
go
it.
to the next one.
Do you want me to come? Just
Okay.
let you know where the.
Wherever you're comfortable.
And you all have a copy of that in your agenda as well.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Good to see you all again. So we've been working back and forth with Maureen and Joanne over the last couple of weeks to put together the update to the long-range plan. So we'll go through that with you tonight. So just quickly to start, I know we've done this a couple times at this point, but just as a refresher in case this is anybody's first time seeing this presentation, or I know we only do it once a year, so in case you've forgotten. What is a long-range plan and why do we do it? Really, we're trying to take a look at trends in our revenues and expenses and use of fund balance and make some projections out of the future. And it helps us evaluate, the impact of decisions we might make and, the affordability of new capital projects, new programs, anything like that. One key distinction with the long-range plan that we always mention every year is this is not, your budget or what we would recommend that you budget. You build your budget differently for a number of reasons than what we're doing here with the long-range plan. We're really trying to kind of project where we think things are going. The budget, you might need to build in a little bit of a cushion into certain lines just for the unknown during the year. So that, I'm not saying take these numbers and plop them in as you build your budget, which I'm sure you're in the middle of working on. This is more kind of forward-looking instead of just the one-year snapshot. And like we say every year, obviously these are important to update. We always recommend annually, but at least every other year probably, because things can change very quickly in school district finance. The great example in recent times was the beginning of COVID when there was talks of 20% aid cuts, and then within a year not only were there not 20% aid cuts, but there was a full freeze in the foundation aid. So things have changed pretty quickly. Just since last year, there's a lot of information out there with electric buses, which isn't necessarily too impactful to you guys, but that's, a big new thing out there for a lot of districts that they're looking at. So with that overview, usually before we get into the projections, we kind of always do a quick recap on your capital side plans that we've been helping you with. So one key thing, and I know we talked about it when I was here a couple months ago, is you're planning for a referendum this May with the budget vote. So this is just a recap on the timing of that for when we were, say, if we did a vote in May of 23, we're assuming that we would kind of get into that over the next couple of years and then maybe have first that service impact in 25, 26. So if we go to the next page, one of the things we had talked about, if you recall, this is kind of the summary of your debt, and this does include the proposed project, even though it hasn't passed yet. If it were to not pass in May for any reason, then we just don't use the debt service fund. But you'll recall from when I was here last time, we talked about we have an opportunity to use in that second column from the right there, the debt service offsets. We're using our debt service fund to help pay for some of our existing debt and basically create the room for that May of 2023 referendum to come in with no additional tax impact. So that is reflected in here. And then you'll also see out to the far right-hand side, we have highlighted in yellow that $271,000 drop in local share. That's that potential for a bigger referendum. And I think we were talking about maybe December of 24 for that as a target. So there's another opportunity even after this May referendum to potentially do another project to replace some more retiree debt service. So that's something that has not been captured in these projections yet, but something to keep in the back of our mind as we get closer to that time frame. Okay, and this is what that looks like. Again, kind of staying at that current level that we're at of about $320,000 a year for our tax capital exclusion. And then we can see in 28 there where that drop off is, that there would be the opportunity. And again, if the drop off is in 28, we'd be planning a few years before that because of all the lead time on projects that I'm sure you're all very familiar with in terms of architect design, SCD approval, all that. Okay, so then going to the next page, basically the summary of the capitals that, looks like you're in good shape other than that last year, the 5-year projection, we'll have to look at that drop off. But starting to look into forward projections, we always like to take a look at our fund balance levels first, look back over the last couple of years and see, have we been in a good spot the last couple of years? Have we been burning fund balance? And we want to keep an eye out for if there's already some structural deficits in the budget. Looking at the bottom of the page here, just above the dashed line going across, you can see your total fund balance over the last couple of years has grown about 300,000 and about another 100,000. So, good trends that you're having good positive budgets in the last couple of years. So that's a good sign. One other thing that we wanted to highlight on the top row there is you did create a capital reserve and start putting some money away into that. So that'll be good if you can kind of keep funding that if you have surpluses over the next couple of years, because that's an opportunity to really maximize that next vote by combining reserves with the drop in debt and building it that you get back. Okay, so then looking forward for projections, we always start, in a second we're going to look at the overall revenue projection, but we always start by breaking state aid out separately because there's so many pieces that go into that. You see all these different lines, and obviously you're not getting every single one of these aids, but there are quite a few of them that you are getting. So really the key takeaways from this slide is that we're basically using for the current year projections, the latest numbers that were released with the governor's budget. But going forward, we're not projecting any additional increases just because we don't know, what might happen with the future of foundation aid now that it's been fully phased in, if it's just going to stay kind of flat or continue to grow from there. So we have assumed conservatively for the projections tonight that we're going to stay flat from here forward. The only thing that's really changing is at the bottom there, the building aid row. We do have increases in the building aid, again, assuming that May 23 referendum passes. A few years out in 25, 26 is when we expect the building aid to start coming online for that project. And we'll also see that service coming on at a similar time when we get to the expense page. Okay, so then overall with the revenues, the other big kind of assumption that we have in the plan tonight is we're assuming that you'll be going out at your maximum tax cap as far as tax increases. And you can see going across the top of the page there, that's what those numbers would look like. So 2.16 this upcoming year. That number's still being finalized. I know it's Joanne had done an estimate too, and it might have been around 2.2 or something like that. So it's in that range of low 2%. And then we're projecting, with some assumptions for what inflation growth factors are gonna do, we are projecting to be around 3% for the next couple of years. And then 28, you see that negative number right now, that's because we're not filling that drop off. So that's an example of what can happen when you don't plan capital projects to replace existing debt, is that you can wind up in a potentially negative tax cap situation as that debt expires. So that's what's in this plan tonight. Obviously, the assumption would be that if you do have capital needs and we plan for or replace that, then that number would stay closer to that 3% level instead of the negative 0.25% that's in there tonight. Other than that, there's not too much else going on with the revenues. The state aid we already went over, and that's really the taxes and the state aid is the majority, almost 90+% of your budget in terms of revenues. Everything else we're just kind of projecting flat going forward. And just one other quick thing, sorry, Joe, before we switch the page here. In the bottom right-hand corner, you see we kind of quantify that average change year over year. So that's about 2.32% of the revenue side. So you just want to put a pin in that and keep that in the back of your mind as we flip to the next page here. Okay, so expenses we're projecting out based on trends. We look back at kind of some of the increases or what we know for increases in salaries or health insurance, things like that, and we're using reasonable projections going forward. When we look at the bottom right-hand corner here, you'll see the expenses are going up at 3.28%. So what does that tell us? Well, when we go to the fund balance page, we know we're going to see our budget get a little further and further away as our expenses are outpacing our revenues. So we'll circle back on that at the end, just in terms of kind of what that means to you as a board and a district. But that's something important to point out. And then the other thing I'll point out on this page is about 2/3 of the way down, we have a section called debt service. So that's where you'll see we do have those lines in there for the proposed project for May of 23. So you'll see that that's starting to come on in the 25 and 26 fiscal years. Again, if that project were to pass. If not, then we wouldn't have that debt there, but we also wouldn't use the debt service fund on the revenue side to offset it. Okay, so if we go to the next page, we kind of put it all together and say, what's the fund balance picture look like? So again, on the top of the page, we have our revenues and expenses from the prior pages, and then what's it looking like? So you see, we do have red there all those years going across, and that's not uncommon, especially right now at this time of school district finance, when you've got inflation of 6, 7, 8%, and you have a limited cap in terms of what you can raise for revenues. So you can see those numbers get bigger as we go out. Again, back to the concept of 3.25% increases on expenses, only 2.25% growth in revenues. So those that hole, so to speak, gets bigger each year. But luckily, you guys are in a strong financial position that you've been able to build some fund balance over the last couple of years with those positive results. And these numbers, although they're red, they're not huge numbers yet. So it does, when we look at the bottom line picture of the fund balance, if things were to go as this plan shows it, then you would be spending your fund balance down, but you'd still be in a positive position 5 years out. So the real takeaway for me from this is that you have time to make corrections if this is how things actually turn out. But that's why you'll update this as you go each year and see, maybe state aid comes in a little bit better than we were projecting. Maybe we do continue to get some increases in foundation aid. Maybe as inflation kind of reins back in, hopefully in the future, we'll see some give back on expenses. Maybe the insurance costs won't be quite so high as what we're projecting this year. So there's a bunch of things that could change that could still make this picture look better. But it is a good reminder when we see those red numbers going across the top, and we just have to be careful, especially about any kind of long-term recurring commitments that we're going to make as a district that could have, that could accelerate that, those deficits in the future years or make them bigger. Okay, and then on the next page, this again is just our tax cap page to kind of show what the plan looks like versus what we're projecting for tax cap. Really the two biggest things that I always like to point out on this page, there's a lot of information here that you don't necessarily need to go through as far as the mechanics of how the formula works, but the two biggest things right in the middle of the page boxed in there, you can see, are we exceeding the cap when we need a supermajority vote? And the answer is no, this plan works without any cap overrides. And then the other big thing that we point out is that bottom row where the red is, you can see we're going right to the cap every year in this plan, so we're not leaving anything on the table. That's where we would see if we were only going with, say, 2% increases each year instead of the maximum cap number, then we would start to get some money that would be left on the table. And that can add up pretty quickly, on a year-over-year basis. It can be, tens or hundreds of thousands, but when you actually get the multiplying effect of starting from a lower base the next year, it can even be, into the millions of dollars that's being left on the table if you don't go to the cap and leave that money there. Okay. So in summary, just to pull it all together again for you, like we talk about every year, when we see those reds in the fund balance, what do we have to think about with that? Well, there's really three ways that we can affect that. We can increase revenues, and really the only way we can do that is what we do with our tax levy, because we have no control over the state aid, and we don't really get many other revenues other than those two sources. We can use reserves or fund balance, but again, that's not a long-term solution because it doesn't replenish if we use it. So that's something that can be used to kind of stave off some difficult decisions for a year or two, but it's not a long-term solution. So really the main way that school districts can affect change if those numbers start to balloon on you and get a little bit worse is by looking at your expenditures, reviewing your contracts, what you're doing with those, thinking about program needs and staffing needs, and looking at opportunities for shared services with the BOCES, neighboring, towns, villages, other school districts, things like that, to try to get some efficiency in the expenditure budget that way. So those are just some of the things you can think about. But overall, I'd say from what we're seeing in this plan, this is still you're in a pretty healthy position compared to some of these other plans we do for other districts. So certainly something that you want to be careful of, think about long-term commitments, but definitely not anything that should be too alarming as we sit here today. Okay.
Yep.
Any questions on that? I know it's a lot of information to go through pretty quickly, but at this point you've seen it a couple of times, so I think some of it's probably a little bit getting familiar for you.
I'm good. Charlie? Anything pop out at you there? Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. As I always say, feel free to stay, but we won't hold it against you if you leave or you'd rather go to watch us.
Next, if you're something in the middle of takeoff. Have a good one.
Thank you for being
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, have a nice day.
The second information, and the board is privy to this information already, Joanne, I may have you chime in if I don't do it justice.
Okay.
But just so the public is aware of it, we had excess fund balance in our school lunch fund this year. And that's as a result of a lot of factors, COVID included, the free lunches, the reimbursement, and all the moving parts that go along with that. And we are required to take that excess and in essence spend it down to a certain point to get to our allowable fund balance, not to totally deplete it. We have very few options. It's one of those other things where our hands are tied a little bit and how we can do that. The first thing we look at is, are there equipment needs for the cafeteria proper that we can address with that? Joanne sat with Mike, reviewed those. We had some, but they were minimal coming off of work we have done strategically over the last couple of years. So we were able to accommodate that. And one of the few other ways we are allowed to use it is to offset the cost of student meals, breakfast and lunch. Knowing that we had limited options, and that's been a passion of the board as a whole to address that bigger than us, we made the decision and went ahead effective last Monday to move to free meals for all students for as long as we can. We are cautiously optimistic that will be through the end of the school year. That could change a little bit based if we have significant increased participation, and then we'll have to revisit that. But at least for the foreseeable future, we'll be able to use those funds to offset the cost of student meals. And we communicated that out to families, and the response has been positive.
The only add, if I could add
Sure.
something, when we say we made the lunches free, we're still, everybody's counted if you're full price, we still submit that to the state the same way we would if somebody's free, true free or reduced, and we'll still get the aid back on that. And we will be purchasing more than half of what we have to get rid of, which is about $44,000. We will be buying some new pieces of equipment, so we'll be buying a new convection oven, high capacity toaster, we'll be getting a new slicer that's a state-of-the-art safety for slicing and things like that. So we will be doing that as well as making the lunch prices zero and breakfast zero.
That is phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Anything else, Dr. Wong?
No.
Let's So on to business office non-action item warrants. Enclosed for the information of the board are copies of the following warrants and the claims auditor report for the month of February 2023. Fund A 34, the amount of $197,923.55. Fund A 35, $107,922.77. Fund A 38, $34,472.33. Is there any questions on that? I have two, if you'll indulge me.
You can give them to us ahead of time.
I didn't, I only just found them out. So one of them's easy. So the claim auditors report 835, page 5 of 5. Claim auditor signed it 2022. Should I make an adjustment on that? Yes.
All right, yep, we can do that. It's that post New Year.
Yes. And then warrant 838, there were 24 checks issued and there's no value to check number 26580. Is that a voided check going through afterwards?
If it, what warrant is it?
38?
Probably has to do with Amazon, I'm gonna guess. What page?
Oh, it's check number 26580.
Yeah, it's because it's continued to, because they're in a check run and Amazon, we pay very many, it'll go through several lines. It'll hit the next check, so it voids that check. Because
It's already done, it's just accounted for, that's a check.
correct,
There's
it'll
no
show,
value to
right,
it.
with no value to it, correct.
That's all I have.
Liz, did you note just to have Mike make that change next time? Is that too?
We'll be talking to him this week, so we'll let him know.
Business office non-action items, budget transfers under $10,000. The budget transfer. Is there any information that we have to provide other than providing it?
No, it's just informational, because I
Information.
have, yeah, if there's transfers over $10,000.
You have to approve those.
For our policy.
Last one is business office non-action items, revenue and budget status report.
This
We'll have a
is
chance to read that.
something new to you, so I will let Joanne just take a little bit of time to kind of talk about what she's sharing with me.
Every attempt should be made that we give a budget and overview, a status report, and a revenue status report on a monthly basis. So that's what you'll be getting from me on a regular basis. It breaks down all the expenditures. If you look at the appropriation status, if somebody says the word appropriation or expenditures, it's the same word, so I wouldn't want to confuse anybody. And you'll go through it. It breaks it down by the functional units. It starts with 1010, which is the Board of Education, and it gives you in the ST3 format by code. It doesn't break every single thing down in the detail under each one, but it will give you that summary. So left column is the budget. Under there's budget, it'll give you the adjustments, and adjustments can be two things. An adjustment could be carryover balance from the end of the previous school year, or it would reflect if we've made a budget transfer in between certain codes. It would show in the adjustments column. It'll always give you the adjusted budget figure, and then you'll see what we've expensed and what we've encumbered, and then what's available. If you were to go down to the bottom page, you'd see that we have $2 million available. We don't really have $2 million available at this point in the ballgame. Oh, that's the revenue, excuse me. It says, sorry about that. It's all at one page. Yes, it still says, no? Hold on.
Well, you're looking at that, Joanne, is it fair to say it's basically a snapshot at this moment
Yep.
in time of where we stand with what we budgeted and what we've expensed, what we've encumbered and what remains?
Correct, it says there's 1.5 million in unencumbered funds, and that's really not a true figure. We'll be looking at that as we go along. I'm still trying to familiarize myself with everything that we have here, so that'll get a little tighter at the end of the year. We'll talk about fund balance as we go through the budget process, and then the third page of that is your revenue. So it'll also tell you what we budgeted in revenues. It starts with real property taxes, and it goes all the way down to the excess cost aid. And you'll see that we still have unearned revenue of $2 million. And again, not quite sure where that's going to end up this year, but I'll be giving you updates as we go along in the budget process, where we are today and where we can project we'll be next year. And again, you'll be getting those on a monthly basis.
Joanne, for, on the higher one, the budget, is that what we budgeted at the beginning of the year, or is that just like when we make adjustments throughout the year, is that what we expect to spend at this point in time for the year?
In what column are you looking at,
Just the
Courtney?
budget column for any of these categories.
So when
Like,
you go to the bottom of that budget column on the left, the left-hand column of numbers,
Yep.
that 10,821,622 was what our
This year's
voters
budget.
approved,
Okay,
okay?
That was our starting point.
and that's true for each category too, so like,
The 85,854,79, that would be your carryover encumbrance figure from last year that we knew we were gonna spend this year. And then the adjusted column would be what we could spend up to 10.9 million.
because it includes the extra.
Yep. Chances are we won't spend all of that. On average, I believe this district is about 3 to 5% unspent. And we'll look at that. It's been a little higher, as every public school district has been over the last few years because of the pandemic. We all had to budget, but we didn't spend it all.
Right,
And you may see some of that this year as well.
Okay, thanks.
And
But you'll be getting that monthly from now on. I'll give you-
This,
Go ahead, no.
I was gonna say, this is a very minor point, but understanding like the 1 asterisk versus 2 asterisk versus 3 asterisk, it's like a roll-up of some sort.
And what that means, Charlie,
Mhm.
Mr. Luke, is that you'd see that under one look, it's just the 1010 code, and underneath that, you would see instructional salaries, non-instructional salaries, contractual expenditures, material and supplies. I don't provide that in such detail at this point in the ballgame. I just do the same way the state makes us do it, but that's what it would be.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I see, so that's, so 10 total.
And every school district in New York State will use the
First
same
two
functional
digits
codes as everybody does. So 1010 would be the Board of Education in any school district you're in. I'm gonna get even more confusing as we go on because I'm gonna include the other funds. I'm not gonna do it all at once, but funds that have a high level of expenditures in a month, which would be your cafeteria, not a high level, but expenditures on a regular occurring basis. And that's gonna be your cafeteria fund, and it's gonna be your federal fund. And I will start to incorporate those in part of what you get on a monthly basis.
For those who don't know, the Board of Education line is not salary.
no.
No. No, it is not.
It is.
You're correct.
Good question. We'll move on to business matters, action items. A is business office, these are action items, treasurer's report. Can I get a resolution on the treasurer's report?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Manans Union Free School District approve the treasurer's report for the month of January 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That resolution passes. Business office action items, disposals of items. Can I get a resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Manans Union Free School District accept the disposals as listed. This one thing is smart form.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That resolution passes. And these are business office action items, non-resident tuition rates. Can I get a resolution here, please?
Whereas Part 174 of the Commissioner's Regulations prescribes the methodology to be used by public school districts in determining the tuition rate to be charged for a non-resident pupil attending a public school district, and the State Education Department produces a non-resident tuition output report of tuition rates annually to be used for billing purposes. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education adopt the tuition rates as stated on the State Education Department non-resident tuition output report to be used for billing purposes in accordance with Part 174 of Commissioner's Regulations.
Can I get a second on that, please?
I second.
With any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That resolution passes. Business office action items, 2023, 2024 budget calendar revision. Can I get a resolution here, please?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Manans Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, hereby approves the attached updated 2023-2024 budget calendar for the purpose of developing the school budget.
Was it, we just took one workshop off?
It
What did we
was
change
the
that?
superintendent uploaded the wrong version of the calendar at the last meeting.
It's the same dates though, yes?
Yeah. And then the asterisk got removed because it wasn't an extra meeting. I apologize.
That's what. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That resolution passes. Personnel matters, letter of resignation for purposes of retirement. Can I get a resolution, please?
Resolution to accept the letter of resignation for purposes of retirement effective close of business July 1st, 2023 for Nancy Sposito, elementary and annotation lab teacher.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That resolution passes.
And I would like to acknowledge Nancy's many years of service to the district and thank her for everything she's done.
Kids will be sad, losing their innovation lab.
Well, they're not losing the lab.
No, not the teacher.
Miss Nancy, thank you very much. We can move on to CSC, CPSE rec.
Good substitute teacher. Oh, sorry, my bad.
Did I skip? No, this next one. CSE, CPSE recommendations. Can I get a resolution there, please?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Manans Union Free School District hereby approves the CSE, CPSE recommendations as submitted.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes. Substitute teachers fully cleared. Resolution there, please.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Manans Union Free School District approve the substitute teachers in the attached document for the 22-23 school year.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That resolution passes. We can move on to enrollment update. Total enrollment for the 2022-2023 school year to date is 295 students. Very small in seventh grade still. The mass influx of seventh graders. Administrative updates, principal comments, please.
Excuse me. Good evening. So in January, we had our winter concert under the direction of Mrs. Hunt, who served as a long-term sub for Mrs. Hayes while she was out on parent leave. So Mrs. Hunt was able to have our kindergarten through fifth graders perform along with our band and a small but mighty chorus. The kids did a really great job. It was Mrs. Hunt's first concert as a music teacher, so congratulations to her as well. We had a pretty packed house, lots of kids, lots of families, and you know, it was great to see the kids on stage and all the kids be able to be in there together. We had our last round of parent-teacher conferences at the beginning of February. That is an opportunity for our teachers to circle back and meet with any families and students who we have any academic concerns about, or meet with any families who maybe the year started off great for them, but they want an opportunity to sit down and meet the teachers now that they're in it a little bit more. For our special area teachers that day, they took advantage of some curriculum time, and they worked with Mrs. Swain from BOCES to really look at mapping out their curriculum and looking at the new standards that have come out over the last couple of years. We also most recently had our high school fair, which all of our eighth graders attended, and this is a chance for them to meet representatives from our 4 high schools, ask questions, hear presentations, and then in the evening, we do a virtual high school fair. It used to be in person, but it was one of the positive outcomes of COVID. We found having it virtually, we had a much higher participation rate from families. So we had that available for them in the evening as well. And again, families can ask questions there in the moment, and then they can also submit questions that we can follow up with. So our eighth graders are in the midst of picking their high schools for next year and really kind of weighing their options and what each high school offers for their particular needs. Our sixth graders this year started a new class called orientation. It was under the direction of Mrs. Vandenberg. It's an opportunity for the kids to get acclimated to middle school. They talk about study skills, they talk about lockers, they talk about having 8 different teachers, they talk about all the things. And they met together twice a week. This sixth grade is very service-minded, and they had asked to do some kind of service learning project at the end, and they did a staff appreciation breakfast for our staff, which was really nice. They made posters. It was really, really well done. And then last but not least, the basket raffle caused lots and lots and lots of conversation amongst our kids over the month of January. The game basket and the picture basket were two of the hottest items. And it's probably one of our best listened to announcements of the entire school year. You can hear the kids cheer from across the different hallways. So a nice January and February, and we have even more great things coming up over the next couple of months.
Great, thank you. You had a winner.
Yeah, apparently Mrs. Mullen's class was very exciting that morning because there were a lot of winners in that room. The Squishmallow basket was another one that was not, I didn't know that one, she was excited. They had like
I don't
a
know what that is.
lottery style pool, they had to split the Squishmallows into a couple of kids.
They won the Roswell Fountain House Sunday party. Then
And
I had the
game
basket.
basket was that room too, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
the game basket was in that room, and then if you bought a play and lotto ticket, you walked into Mrs. Mullins' room first.
Yes.
The results of that, the ticket
Audit.
PTA did it on Facebook Live.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in the polling of the tickets.
Thank you, Ms. Canavo. We can move on to superintendent comments, Dr. Long.
The first item listed is the League of Women Voters. They had reached out to me, and I wanted to share with you to assist us in anything leading up to the budget vote in May. And one of the services they offer, which intrigued me and which is why I wanted to share it with you for consideration, is in the event that we have multiple candidates running for board seats, the board really can't participate in that process. The administration can't really participate in that process. Oftentimes PTAs will host a meet the candidates forum, but the League of Women Voters offers assistance with that, should that be something we wanted to entertain moving forward. And to our point of the earlier conversation, it takes the potential for, it brings an unbiased opinion to the table to just really moderate an opportunity. So I just share that in the event, again, the last couple of times we have sought to fill board seats, we've had multiple people interested. So if we find ourselves in that situation again, it might be an opportunity to take care of it. And Liz has all that information if it's something we choose to pursue.
Would they come here or do they have a facility?
They've done it here and they've done it for a couple of districts, have spoken very highly of what they've done. Again, with COVID, a lot of folks have moved to a virtual option to do it in addition to a live option. So I think they're open to whatever we would want.
Great.
Budget advocacy, and you're gonna see this in the budget workshop shortly. A number of opportunities have been available for board members, for Joanne and I to unpack the budget. We've taken full advantage of those opportunities and will continue to do so. We did have a meeting with our colleagues in North and South Colony scheduled to meet with Assemblyman Steck. That was a snow day. So that has been rescheduled and we will be going on Wednesday. Michelle, Bill, Joanne and I will be attending that. And for those of you going, I've got the address right here for you if you want to jot it down. 198 State Street, room 627. And we should be there for 10 o'clock. There is security to get in and through the Capitol entrance, so just plan accordingly. And if you, account for parking. And if you need additional information or guidance on parking and interest, just reach out to Liz and we'll get you all situated. You know where to go. Healthcare worker bonus is something that came out of post-COVID. And was available to many organizations, schools included, for select individuals. We did work through that application process for those individuals that we identified who would qualify for those bonuses. And the way it works is we have to do a submission through a portal. Those employees have to do a verification form. The money gets released to us. Once the money gets released to us, then we in turn deploy it to those employees. There are 4 phases in which this will happen. We have had to apply for the first 2 of those 4 thus far. We went through the process, the money was sent to us and was deployed to those employees last week or the week before. Okay.
That's great too. That's great, thank you.
Strategic plan update. I am very pleased with our progress to date on the strategic plan, especially knowing the board has only adopted it in October.
We've been working with BOCES to figure out how to make the reporting out of that progress the most efficient way and kind of show our ongoing progress throughout the 5 years of the strategic plan. So we are very close to getting there. I kind of gave marching orders that we needed that venue in which to do that via our webpage by the end of this month, because my plan is to do an initial report at the March board meeting of our progress today.
Thank you very much. Any questions for anybody? We'll move on to miscellaneous. Good time for board members to suggest items to present for next month's meeting, or anything they don't want to comment about at all.
I just had a quick question. So the police thing that we did, the forum, so what are the next steps? I know some people had sent some communication to the board, so are we gonna discuss it or is it just?
So I would say not yet, and let me tell you why. So today was the date we gave for the cutoff of comments through the BOE comments. Everything that was asked or commented the evening of the forum proper has been posted to the webpage along with any updates. And then we have continued, and right up until I think yesterday, receive additional information in comments from members of the public. So as of 6 o'clock tonight, everything we've gotten to date is posted along with the response. In some cases, they were comments that didn't garner a response. One of the suggestions, and this is why I'm gonna suggest we wait just a little bit longer to discuss it, one of the suggestions that was made by a community member at the forum was, all the adults are talking about this, we should really involve the kids in this process, which was a great idea. So I actually worked directly with that community member over the last couple of weeks and our communications person to kind of capture what it was that we wanted to know from kids, and the best way to get it from kids, depending if they're a 4th grader versus an 8th grader or somewhere in between. We did make a decision that we weren't gonna have that conversation be below 4th grade. And so today, I met with 4th grades, 6th grades, and 7th grade classes, shared with them in essence the same presentation we did to the community, tweaked it a little bit for age appropriateness, and then deployed via either their homeroom teachers or Mr. Schweitzer in his social studies classes at the middle school, the survey. He gave them some time to do it in class. 4th grade homeroom teachers are allowed some time too. The response has been good so far with those, not good one way or the other, but just a lot of kids have completed it. Tomorrow, I meet with the 5th grade and the 2 8th grade classes, and we'll get similar results. So I would encourage the board between now and the March meeting to look at everything that's on the webpage, and if we get any more tonight, we will add that to it. When we come together in March, I will be able to share with the board then the feedback from the students, and I think that will be a really good time to discuss it.
Anybody else? I noticed the PTA has a chicken parm dinner on Thursday. No one knows about it. They recommend
I'm over there, what
I
today,
think they
additional details. Thank you.
pre-order.
Yep.
Just want to understand, it's 100 meals total, 104 meals.
It's 100 subs more.
Right.
100 people can
Good.
place an order.
That's my
Very
understanding.
confusing, but anyway. I just wanted to comment, when I was online and I had to look up some information, I pulled up our website, and I noticed Mrs. Nersessian had a inside and out section, and I was really enjoyed looking at all the pictures from her inside out day. No one's looked at it. It's a wonderful thing. You should take a look at it. Last thing I had was March. We should probably schedule and make sure we make a note to ask the yearbook to come and take the board's picture.
Right.
Alongo's out of town, so he'll be here back on March. So.
Just on that Inside Out Day, Liz has been kind of commandeering our Friday updates, which we're sending to the board as well, and she's doing a really nice job of linking pictures in that too, and bringing people right to the webpage as well.
Okay, great. Let's move on to public comment. Please note, during the public comment sessions, members of the community may address the board on agenda and non-agenda items. The board president may limit marks of individual speakers to a reasonable time. Speakers must identify themselves and the topic on which they would like to make remarks. You can do that at boecomments@manans.org. Anybody have anything?
I don't have
Is there
anything
anyone
online.
online asking anything?
No questions online.
Dr. Long, do we have anything other
Nothing
than
in
the
BOE
comments from the
comments?
public forum?
Anybody here?
Ready? Then we will make a motion to adjourn. And we plan on entering into the budget workshop immediately after, perhaps a two-minute break in between their spectacular. So I'm getting a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And we will continue the recording going. We can go ahead and mute it for the 2 minutes while we break. So anybody who is listening, if you want to stay for the budget forum, that will be recorded as well. And then when we post that on the webpage, we'll do it separately as well, the same recording, but we'll put the timestamp of when that budget forum starts. So if folks want to fast forward to that, they're able to do so.
Perfect.
Unmute. There we go. And we're back.
Okay, it's been quite a while since Joanne and I have done this together, so. But for members of the board who were here last year, the format is much the same. Tonight will really be an overview. Bill, I hope you noticed, and I did this all on my own without Liz's help. I created this new slide format with our new header that says grades pre-K through 8.
I did notice it, and I want to thank you for that, because we are now a pre-K district, so
I did
it's a wonderful.
know how to and learn how to use the snip tool because Liz showed me how, but I did it all by myself.
She did.
All right, so this is our initial budget workshop presentation for this evening. So what, in essence, we look at what is going to drive this. The board and our community spent a lot of time over the last couple of years taking what used to be 21 separate board and district goals and really focusing on what is important to us, and that's what landed us at these 4 overarching district goals. And these are really the things that we are trying to accomplish and trying to achieve. So it will be these goals in essence that drive what we are spending our funds on, which is really wrapped up in that last one, fiscal responsibility. Just a little loose slide. Okay, hold on. Go ahead, you can, go ahead, I think. So, those folks who.
Sorry.
That's okay. Again, those of you who have been here either as members of the board or as participants in meetings have heard me say this before. We will work from the perspective of what we know to be true at this moment. Oftentimes, when we're having this initial meeting, that is not much because we don't even have a governor's proposed budget. So we're a little bit ahead of the game now. We were last year, and there is some good news, and we'll talk about that in a second. Regardless of that, things will change. I think we're pleased with what came out of the governor's budget, but there's always room for improvement. That's where our advocacy comes in. And I think really important for us as we go through the next year or two, we know, and it was alluded to earlier in Jason's comments, there was some funding that came along with COVID that we have for a period of time, depending on which avenue or which of the grant funding sources. That will begin to sunset as soon as this summer in some cases, and the following August in other cases. We have put some things in place that have been beneficial to our students and we hope will continue to be. In some cases, we hope it will mitigate some shortcomings and they may be able to go away. But we have to be really mindful of the fact that that funding is going away and planning to continue those things that we might choose to continue. What will shape our process? The same questions we have used in the past. What do our students need? And I put in there in consideration of what has changed, and we know a lot has changed over the last couple of years. What do we want for our students? And that conversation is not simply limited to academics. How can we accommodate both of those? And then something we have added to the presentation since we completed our most recent building project, and that is operations and maintenance and physical plants needs. We put a lot of time, a lot of effort, and quite frankly, a lot of money into our facilities to accommodate the instructional and other goals that we have. We need to make sure we're being attentive to that and continuing to maintain and keep those facilities in the manner that we need them to be without coming up against a large need that's unaccounted for or unplanned for. I will say I couldn't put the little paw prints in, let's have to do that. So at tonight's we're not going to get into a lot of the nitty gritty. We're really going to just give an overview of what to expect moving forward. We're going to talk about an overview of the governor's proposed budget, the tax cap calculation. Again, Jason alluded to that a little bit earlier today. And then the factors influencing budget development. And when we get there, we'll talk about, there's some things we have a pretty solid idea of right now. There's some things we are not sure of yet, so we will continue to update those throughout the process. So for the second year in a row, an improvement of what we have come to expect with the governor's proposed budget. So it's welcome news, I will say that. But I was just sharing with Bill prior to the meeting, and I would encourage you, because I know we have access now. There was a great article in today's Times Union about the foundation aid formula and the fact that it's been around for 16 years and up until this year, it's not been fully funded, and there's still a but that we're going to get to in just a second about that. So overall, though, what the governor proposed was an increase in education funding and, in her mind, fully funding foundation aid. And really a lot of the things we've had to work hard for after the release of the governor's budget was in some way, shape, or form included. So there is a continued commitment to fully fund foundation aid. There is a but there. If you are looking at the aid runs, and we'll see this in a slide in a few minutes, our foundation aid number is what we anticipated it would be, actually a little bit higher with an adjustment for inflation. However, $100,000 of that is tied to high-impact tutoring, which means we can only do certain things with it. The more interesting part to me, and I'll try not to get on my soapbox tonight, is the fact that any district that is already fully funded, which is a lot of districts that were fully funded for the 14 years we weren't fully funded, they don't have that qualifier. So those of us who've been waiting 16 years to get fully funded are, yes, fully funded, but for 100,000 of it being told very specifically how we can use that funding. We'll talk more about it. Also good news, there's no mention of eliminating or combining expense-based aids, which has come up pretty regularly over the past several years. Again, we have a but. The one thing of concern, and again, you'll see this on a subsequent slide, is those Okay. Those expense-based aids are based on real numbers. When the governor runs her proposed budget and the aid runs that go along with it, those are based on the data we have submitted as of November. And we continue to update and modify our data throughout and across the year. The next major update is actually this month in February. Historically, the runs are adjusted to reflect the updated numbers. For us, that's a big deal. We're a small population, but we're a small population that changes quite often. So we want the most current numbers are going to be the most accurate reflection of what we spent. One of the proposals, as it stands now in the governor's budget, is that those numbers will be frozen at the November dates. Not just for us, for all districts. Now, that
For
could be
this
a win.
Current year or for like going
Well,
forward?
moving into next year, right? So right now, what we see, and you'll see it in the slide in just a second, would be what we get. That February adjustment may not occur.
Okay.
It can be ups and downs, but in my mind, real is fair.
Yeah.
Not what it was in November. So again, something we will have to watch. So the budget, though, as proposed, coupled with the current COVID funding, continues to provide us opportunities now and in the future. So go ahead, Joanne, and go on to the next slide. This is a slide that was up last year with the numbers adjusted accordingly back in 2021, and you see the difference this has made for our district. I will point out for those of you who are new to us and may not have sat through the earlier presentations, not only were we one of 65 underfunded districts across the state, we were the lowest funded for 16 years, getting only 30% of what we were entitled to. Imagine the compounding effect of that. So in 2021, you see our foundation aid number was just shy of $500,000. We were increased, as everybody who wasn't there yet was, to 60% of full funding in 21-22, bringing us to 806,305. And then the promise last year was to take all districts and get them fully funded by the end of this year. So you see the number we received last year and the total this year. Again, that same but is there because they're kind of tying our hands on $100,000 of that as it stands right now. Go ahead, Joanne. And Joanne, if at any time I'm missing pieces and you want to jump in, please feel free to do so. Thank you. So this is when we talked about those November numbers and the February numbers. On this slide is, on the left-hand side, the 2022-23 executive budget is what the governor proposed. The only thing you see in red on that side is the pre-K funding, because though it sits in our runs, it really is separate and apart from that. So that's more just for a visual. It is what we get. On the right-hand side, you see some other things in red: high cost, excess cost, private excess cost, and transportation, including summer. Those are those things that changed because, or we anticipate will change based on our February numbers. So if that freezing were to take place, we would stay stuck at the first column.
it wouldn't adjust for reality.
I will jump in and say one thing. Generally, when the governor presents this budget, these numbers are based on last year's numbers that we put in for high-cost children, whether they're private or public. So this gives us the opportunity to see what's gonna actually happen now. I know Audrey spent some time today with one of our state aid planners to kind of review those numbers. I'll be able to make some adjustments to these figures that I think will put us in a good place. And again, I will go back and I will double check transportation and the summer, because I want to make sure that it's not overstated. Very often districts can in their ST3 assume they're going to spend more money, and the governor's going to project transportation aid, and you don't spend that much money, and it would be a negative hit. So I'll spend a little bit of time. These are just things that you might see an adjustment in.
You go ahead to the next slide, Joanne. And again, this is where we've made the adjustments based on what we know to be true at this moment in time. I will note, and I asked Joanne to put it at the bottom there, that high impact tutoring set aside of $100,000. So our foundation aid is really $100,000 less than what is proposed, because that's coming off of the top of that. Now, what they're proposing for that high impact tutoring set aside is not a bad thing. I don't want you to get me wrong. They're trying to take kids who are at risk coming off of COVID, of not being successful, and provide them opportunities throughout the course of the school day to make gains. That's very noble. It's a great thing. Here's the reality. We've already done that. We've done it with some of the other funding that is available to us, and very specific in this language for this set aside is it has to supplant, not supplement. So it's not like we can move the money out and move this money in. It has to be in addition to what we are already doing, which if we weren't already doing something, I can certainly see that. This is not just a Manans concern. This is a concern of our neighbors who will be advocating with us on Wednesday, of my professional organization. And I don't know if any of you had the chance to go to the NISBA opportunity last Friday. My guess is that they talked about this too.
Isn't this also specifically for, if I read it, 4th, 5th, 6th graders?
Yeah, only, it's for 3rd through 8th is my recollection, yeah. So those tested
Oh, 3rd
years.
through 8th.
So
There's
and that's
something else I
one
read that
of
I
the
thought it was very
other
specific. Okay.
complaints of other districts is you're tying our hands on this money. We can't even use it for our high school kids. And for us, we can't use it for our K2 kids.
Yeah.
So more to come on that. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Joanne. And again, Jason alluded to this earlier on the tax cap calculation, and she has this year's and a couple of others for you to look at as well.
And again, we'll do a 3-year snapshot on what we know we've done in the past, and again, what we're projecting right now. One of the odd things with the state of New York is they do a lot of odd things, that we have to submit this March 1st. So, we can change it if something were to happen, but our initial submission to the state is on March 1st. So we know what our prior year tax levy is at 7.4 million. Again, with the tax-based growth factor is set from Office of Real Property Tax Services, and we know that's 1.0019. You'll notice in the previous year was a little higher, but then again, back in 21-22 was much lower. That is the actual brick and mortar improvements to our community, or what our assessments are based on. The prior year pilot payment, that was I believe the first year we've gotten that pilot, but it was 31,000, so we add it back in. And so then we take the prior year capital tax levy exclusions. I'll talk about exactly what they are when I come down a little bit further. And then the allowable growth factor, that's CPI. We know it can't be any higher than 2%, and it's 8, so we're only getting 2, which I think, again, is kind of crazy, but that's what it is. And those are all comes in. And would you see this column? You're going to start here. You're going to subtract, times, add, subtract. I just want you to know kind of you can walk through the calculation. And then what we're going to do with the pilots for the coming year. And what I've done, I reached out to the town of Colony. I know that right now the pilot that we have, the percentage of the tax payment will go up 10% each year until it's at 100%. So I made that assumption. Jason and I went through it. He agreed with me, and that'll be the smallest it is. That may change through the course of what the tax rate ends up being and the assessments. But again, I wouldn't go back in and change it in the state website unless it was a material change, and I would run that by our auditor, and right now I assume it to be about $33,000. That gives you our tax levy limit, and then we do capital exclusions for the coming year. And what that means is we put in what our debt service payments are, and then we take out any of the aid from the state of New York that helps us offset that. So that's what the net figure is. It's our debt service payments less the building aids. There's a little bit of a BOCES aid figure that we have to take out of that. So we get to add that into our maximum allowable levy. So right now, over the previous year, that is 2.17 if we max it out to what we're allowed to do. Is there any questions on that?
And Jason made the comment, and you can go ahead, Joanne, in his earlier presentation, and this is something we as a board, and I know we have new members have talked about, we've spent a lot of time looking at the potential to need to go above the tax cap, the desire potentially to go below the tax cap. I think over time we have realized the benefit of going to the tax cap if it is a reasonable number, because otherwise we leave money on the table. Not only do we leave money on the table that's compounded over years, but that kind of sets us backwards in establishing our cap for next year, making it potentially lower than it would be. So I will tell you at this point in time, unless I hear from the board differently over the course of the next couple of weeks, and knowing we're right at about really 2% anyway, the first draft budget we will develop and bring to you will be with the assumption that we're going to go to the allowable cap.
Anybody got anything on that? You still good? There is information in an article, I think I might have shared one with you, and coming out, they're talking about starting with the next year's
Really too.
budget. They're talking about just making it 2%. There's no more calculations. It's not 2.17, it's not 0.38, it's 2% for everyone. But let's see what happens when that happens. But right now, if it's that number it is, I'm fine with keeping it at the max without going over.
If it was like for future years, what's that mean when just in the long-term planning thing, when we were seeing like the 2.9 and 3%, it means we wouldn't, if that happened, we would
Cut expenditures or
right,
find more
we'd be
revenue.
stuck at 2.
Or ask the voters to approve.
So you can go higher than your tax cap, but if you do, you need more people.
Yeah, like
Is it
the
like 60% or something
supermajority or
like
whatever.
that? It's a higher number that you
Yeah,
would
yeah,
pass
I've
it.
done that once, year one.
Does it change though if some law was passed? I mean, we wouldn't,
There could potentially be all kinds of fallout.
Yeah.
And to your point, Charlie, a couple of years out, our cap is 3.93. One of the things when the tax cap first came into play, which was actually my first year here, that was kind of a misnomer, was it was put out there as a 2% tax cap, and it really isn't
They
2%.
advertise it that way.
So when we were putting out something other than 2%,
Right.
especially if it was above that, well, what do you mean? It's supposed to be a 2%
Right.
tax cap.
Mhm.
I think our community has, through our efforts in part, really come to understand and appreciate that and the efforts that we do. But still, especially coming off the last couple of years we have, 3.93% is a tough number to look at.
Mhm.
Any other questions before I move on? Or comments? So our driving factors are board and district goals and strategic plan. What we are mandated to do, those things we have to do, which hopefully won't include that set aside. Our student, staff, and faculty needs, and those things we might like to do as well. Go ahead, Joanne. So there, as I said at the very onset of the presentation, there are things that will change, that we'll be able to tighten up as we go through this process and will help us create our budget. Tuitions. Those tuitions are primarily, when I'm talking here, are high school tuitions. We just received last week our first billing for this year for our current high school students. What we will do with that now is go through, we got one from South Colony, North Colony, I don't know if we've got Watervliet yet, But we will get that in the very near future. They usually wait till halfway through and do that billing. You know, with 2 of those districts, we've negotiated actual costs. So what we'll spend the next couple of days or weeks going over, Joanne and I, Audrey plays a part in that, Jen plays a part in that because they know our prior students, is we look at what we're being billed, align that with the services the students that are receiving to assure that they are reasonable, to make sure, and this is where Liz's help comes in, students are still enrolled with us and we know they are attending there and that they're still living here. And what that will do once we get through that process is that will really help us forecast then what our costs will be through the end of this year and then rolling forward to next year. Because the other piece we will then take a look at is how many 8th graders do we have moving into high school, but we also have to look at how many high schoolers do we have coming out of high school. And first Blanche this year, we have far more kids coming out than going in, which could provide us a little bit of relief. We have other years where it's the opposite. And we know our enrollments coming K4 after next year are getting bigger. So we're probably going to get the second situation more. So we just have to be attentive to that. Special education needs and associated costs. So that not only includes our programming here at school, but those students who would qualify for and benefit from an out-of-district placement. And then the transportation that goes along with that. And that's Audrey's in the process now of starting her annual review season, which is that process she goes through with families to identify student needs moving into next year. And her information will be integral in that process moving forward. And it takes quite a while to get through those meetings. So, you know, each time we meet to discuss budget, we'll be able to tweak those to the extent that we can. Will we ever get to a perfect number by the time you have to approve a budget and present it to the voters? We won't, but we'll have a much clearer vision the closer we get. Enrollment and staffing, it's no surprise to anybody here, our enrollment's gone up. You know, I could pull out the piece of paper when I started 10 years ago. Anybody want to guess the number of students we had?
He told us it was like 186 or something.
234. 234. And our projections when we were doing the building project said this year we would be at 217. We are approaching 300, and sometimes we're over 300 depending on the day. I shared with the board, I think already in a communication in one of your updates. So we have always had what we call a singleton since I've been here at K5, meaning there's been one grade that's only had a single section. Over the last several years, we've had 2 kindergartens. If we get 2 kindergartens this year, that means there's no more singleton. And you can't take one Mrs. Kepler and put her in 2 places.
So
So
we would like to.
the reality exists. We could find ourselves in a position moving into next year where we need an additional staff member to address our enrollment increases. I think we've been a little lucky over the years. The numbers have fallen the way they've fallen. It was a matter of time before it was going to catch up with us. And I would much rather be in a situation with increasing enrollment where many of our colleagues across the state are dealing with the opposite, declining enrollment, which is a much bigger problem to have. And then the last piece is our BOCES final service request. As you know, there are certain services, some of those being special education placements, among other things, a lot of our technology things that we do and purchase, we do through BOCES to get that cost reimbursement through that process. We are just now working through developing what's called that final service request. So Joanne and I, Audrey's a part of that, Jen's a part of that, our technology folks from South Colony are a big part of that. We sit and look at everything we purchased this year. The first thing we say is, what did we get this year that we know we need to carry over to next year? What did we purchase partway through the year this year because we had a need for it? Do we want to continue that? Do we need to continue it, or can we reduce it? And are there other things out there that we anticipate we are going to need? At the same time, are there things we're currently purchasing through BOCES that we don't think we will have to moving forward? And that's what's the deadline for that, Joe?
It's middle of April, the middle to end of April.
So again, By the time you've got to finalize decisions, we won't be 100% there, but we will be a lot closer than we are right now. Any questions? So our efforts to date, as I mentioned earlier, two of us along with Joanne and I, two of you along with Joanne and I will be visiting the Assemblyman on Wednesday, along with our colleagues from North and South Colony. Joanne and I had a chance to attend a legislative breakfast. I put this in your update as well at BOCES. And I will say it was very well attended by our staffers throughout the region. In many cases, the senators and assemblymen themselves and not office staff, which sometimes has been the case historically. Senator Ashby was here pre-taking the seat, actually, and the same communication that we will share with Assemblyman Steck on Wednesday, we will adjust and send to Senator Ashby. I just want to make sure my colleagues in North and South Colony are good with that because it is a joint communication. If for some reason they're not, that's fine. We'll take off their logos, leave ours, and we'll send it off to them. I noted participation in many various opportunities to unpack the information to date. Joanne and I was a little more in and out, sat through the state aid planning webinar on February 8th. I sat through the NISCUS, which is my organization, the Council of School Superintendents summary on Thursday, February 9th. I have a monthly legislative meeting with my counterparts from Cap Region BOCES that was very much targeted to the budget. Last Thursday, Joanne had her monthly school business officials meeting last Friday. That was very much, again, NISBA had the Capitol Conference, and I'm not sure who was able to pop on and off. It was virtual. I did like it better when it was in person, but it is what it is and understandable. So we will continue to take advantage of every opportunity to learn more, know more, do more, see more. So at our next workshop, any updates out of the governor's office will come. And really, this is the negotiation part in the Capitol, in the chamber, and with the governor. They had 2 full days of hearings last week where folks, including NISCUS and NISBA, said their piece to the committee chairs on education. Shelley Mayer is the chair of the education committee, and allowed to be heard. And now those 2 houses have to take what they're hearing from the chairs, what they're hearing from their constituents, us, and go back with proposals. Now, historically, I will say a lot of times that is an ask for more money. This year, I don't foresee that as being an ask for more money. Usually the governor's budget is a floor and we go up from there. I don't think our numbers are going to go up, nor do I think we can expect they should with what we've been given. I think more of the asks that we'll be pursuing this year are some tweaks in what and how. So for instance, just give us the foundation aid and let us run with it. Don't hold $100,000 hostage. Maybe our ask will be, don't use those November numbers, keep it running as it is. So it's more of things and not dollars. The nice part is I think those are a little bit easier to negotiate. Sometimes when it's dollars we're asking for, that will delay the approval of the budget, which puts us in an even more difficult position. I will be cautiously optimistic. I don't see any significant barriers or red flags leading me to believe we won't have other than an on-time budget this year, which puts us in a good position. And we will bring you a draft 1 budget for the 23-24 school year. We might have one more.
March 13th.
March 13th.
Just a
along with
couple
our
things.
regular board
Everyone's getting the NISBA updates when they send them. It goes to your school account. They do a pretty good job on keeping boards informed on what they're advocating, and a lot of what Dr. Malone just said is in there. It broke down, it had a whole guideline, everything from the actual governor's budget and then breakdowns on their advocacies and what they think our districts need, and read your board emails. In the budget we're putting together, are we, and we haven't gotten there, but are we accounting for SRO money?
So I would say two things. Again, we don't want to make assumptions, but we have to be planful for those things that are in consideration. So, and I know we're going to talk more about it. Michelle asked about it. At this point in time, it is my intent to bring it in the draft one budget. It is also my intent to bring an additional staff member based on that information I just shared. I think though those are things that may not happen, it would be fiscally irresponsible of us not to include those. If we find, in the case of an officer, that is not something the community is fully supportive of, we can always back it out. The same as we go through kindergarten registration, which is going on now. If we really do believe that we may not get to 2 sections, we have the opportunity to back that out. But I would much prefer to start with it in and know what we're really looking at, rather than have to try and pigeonhole it in after.
I've seen the children in the neighborhood. I would plan on 2 sections of kindergarten registrations. Also then, moving forward, can we actually get a number on what, let's just assume the state this year, their hands are tied, and I don't think any move's gonna happen on the universal meals for everybody. What it does for our district moving forward, what a number actually is, so we can see it, to provide that opportunity and continue that moving forward.
Yeah,
I know it's difficult because
right, it's a moving
what you
number.
get reimbursed and what comes from and how it's calculated, but it's gotta be something we can grab onto and put our hands around and say, this is what the number is. Do we want to move forward with that?
We can come up with the number. Here's, and maybe caution is too strong a word. I don't want to make it too easy to let the state and the feds off the hook either.
Oh, no, 100%. It should still be put. It's not a huge, in the state's budget, it's not a huge number. And I believe it was $380 million. It's not a huge number.
The only thing we have to be, pay attention to as a district, so we get state aid, as we know, based on if it's a free lunch, if it's a reduced lunch, or if it's a full price. There are some formulas involved on what we have to charge a regular full price meal. It has to meet a certain level, so it's not less than what the state, the federal and state gives us back for reimbursement. So we may be able to do that, but I don't know if we won't get the aid on it. So we could not only bear the cost of doing that, and then double hit would be not to get the aid on the meals that we're providing. So
But
not
we can
only-
come up with a number as
I
a
was gonna
starting.
say, there's gotta be something to start with.
There is.
And then if it's a matter of hounding people to say you need to fill out the forms, then let's get the forms filled out.
We
For
have
reimbursement.
regular.
Perfect. Is there anyone else that had anything dire they wanted to see in the budget?
Did we look at the tennis court? Like, is that? have we
Tennis
talked
court
about
was
that?
that can go in the paving. I wouldn't do the tennis court if we were to do the tennis court outside of a capital project.
Okay.
Because we would forego the aid on it.
Right.
They could pick up the money, but. That was a topic
I
of
remember
much
that was
discussion
from a long
during the
time
last
ago.
building
Yeah, it
project.
was just one that I remember that
We
we
wanted
dropped.
to have that done big. I remember Jeff
Yeah.
was big on it also, right?
Yeah.
A lot of community members use the outdoor areas of the
apartments
school. A lot of people do.
Yeah.
It's in rough shape though.
That's why you'll get people to turn out for your 2024 vote for when debt comes up.
I just had a quick question. So when Brian, I think this Brian from the finance from our advisors were here. So he said I think May 23 is like some capital project. Is that the one that includes the roof and the?
So that's right. So
Okay.
we put that out to the voters this June, in May of 23 for them to ideally approve. Then there's a whole process that needs to go through with SED approval. You as a board have decided to try and kind of speed that process up, being optimistic, and have gone ahead and approved the design work now. Joanna is doing all the paperwork and information that goes along with that. And I think we're very strategic in doing that, because if the design work wasn't done, then we could not start the following summer. Now we'll be prepared to start the following summer to actually do the work itself. And that includes 3 things: HVAC, roofs, and paid them. And then Jason also showed you the drop off in 2028, where if we want to keep that impact to the taxpayer stable, and going back to our earlier slide, continue to pay attention to our facilities, we would plan potentially a larger project to come on in 2028. If things keep going, we're gonna need more space.
Space, outdoor
There's,
areas.
we're gonna need
things
more
like that.
space.
30, 35 kids per
Um,
grade.
Yeah.
There's not enough space, but I think I'm gonna get.
And if we look at needing that to come on the books in 2028, we actually have to back up a couple of years from that to plan and do that vote in 25, 26, again, to get the ball rolling and the aid flowing in the year that it needs to.
Which means
And
we need to
another
start
year
planning
prior to that
Right.
for development and costs.
community input,
and
you
get
know,
the
what do we
community
actually want to
involved.
do? Right.
So
Basically
basically,
means we
the
need to
start of
start.
next year.
And, you know, it's not a bad position to be in. It's work, it's needed work, it's necessary work, it's valuable work. And I think there were many, many years that we didn't do that, quite frankly. We waited 13 years to look at our facilities. And then by the time we had that conversation, it was like, oh my goodness. Whereas if we continue to have these conversations and be planful and thoughtful on a regular basis, we can achieve what we
Minimal
need to and
impact.
want to, and without all of a sudden hitting the taxpayers with something they weren't anticipating.
Yep.
Anybody else? Told Joanne, I'm gonna eat a 3 sheet.
No, you got 2 minutes. What's a 2-minute question?
Yeah, it was 8:02.
Keep talking.
Oh, I got more questions,
This again will be posted, our budget and taxes pages will be updated to reflect everything that we do this year during budget development, so. Throughout.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.